One of the stupidest things, um, I guess a pet peeve of mine in books is, or maybe even in television, really. Um, it's when you have the author swapping between the perspectives of different characters in between chapters, because basically what ends up happening is you find some of it fun and interesting to read, and the other bit of it you don't find it very fun to read. And even if you do miraculously um, enjoy reading both or all of, depending on how many characters there are, because there might be several, like in Game of Thrones, even if you end up enjoying, um, each character's perspective, every time you start to get to a really good part or something like momentum really kicks up for one character and then it just switches to another character in the next chapter that's halfway across the world that's doing something way more boring, you will feel like the disappointment um as you realize you'll have to slog through or at least kindle the fire of passion to read that chapter, so that you can get back to the part that you were just reading. Basically, I don't exactly know why authors do this, except to I think that mainly it's to keep things interesting is the idea. Like you're sprinkling some spice over something. Because I guess the idea is maybe you could get bored as a reader of reading of one character's perspective and events happening in one place for too many chapters in a row. But I think that if that were the case, that just means that as an author, you're doing a really bad job of writing something that's fun and interesting to read. I had a problem with this in the Inheritance Cycle series. I think it was in the second or third book because like the Aragon chapters compared to the Rorian chapters were not very good. Um, Basically what it usually is, like in Game of Thrones or in The Witcher here or whatever, is you'll have some characters that are going on a fun adventure, and then other characters are sitting down and talking about politics. And the author will force you, kind of. I mean, you can just skip the chapters, but I mean, then you might miss some detail. Basically, the author is trying to make you read things in a certain order. And I highly doubt, honestly, that most of the time events need to be read so chronologically. Um, I think that it is an effort by the authors to make things more interesting. But again, it's just you basically get to compare which chapters are more fun, more or less fun to read. And you have some that you start to not look forward to, and then the other stuff that you do enjoy. And it also forces you to pay attention to multiple different stories that are happening at once. And you might have dozens and dozens of characters. Um, Whereas if you were just reading from one character's perspective for like 12 chapters in a row, then you could really get invested. I mean, here's how I think it should work. I think if you have a book series that has multiple protagonists, like in Game of Thrones, I think that what you should do is have so much of the book um, be one character, from that character's perspective, and don't switch to another character until that character's story is done in that part of the book, in that part of the story. Then you can switch to another character and build on that. Um, because also something that can happen, since there's pacing in storytelling, where you kind of make things exciting and then you make things less exciting and more boring, I guess. Even though things shouldn't be boring in theory, they should just be, I guess, peaceful and calm is the right word. Um, Sometimes things are really like exciting and wild, and other times they're peaceful and calm, and that's a pacing thing. But what is often happening is that you'll use one character for the wild chapters and the exciting chapters, and the other chapters will be the calm and peaceful ones. And I think that there's definitely, it's a lot more likely that, basically, if it's a calm chapter, you risk it being very, very boring. And if it's a so-called exciting chapter, you risk it being like constant descriptions of battle that just get very boring because you're just constantly describing like, oh, the hero slashed this guy across the chest and he fell over and bled out, and then he whirled around and chopped off this guy's head. And it's like it's just pages and pages of that happening, and that like that's what a lot of Rorian chapters and Aragon chapters, I guess, too. Like there was a lot of that where it's just they're constantly describing this same stuff, and there's limited vocabulary. Like the English language only has so many words, so there's only so much you can say. And there's also in traveling sections of stories, it gets really repetitive because the author starts describing, what characters are having for breakfast and when they go to bed and what the terrain looks like. And some, like, it can be interesting for a while, but basically what can happen is like in this book, what is it? Time of Contempt in The Witcher. Basically, like some of the characters would be discussing politics, and it was really boring. And honestly, I don't think it should have been in the book. For like a lot of it should not have been in the book at all, because we should have just focused on the fun characters like Dandelion and Geralt and Ciri. Um, I don't. Does anyone find fictional politics fun? Because I don't think anybody even finds real politics fun. I think that people just talk about real politics because they have concerns about what's happening in the world and they worry about things, and that makes them interested in politics. I don't think that anyone really actually likes politics. They just kind of get a sense of doing something, of having like an adult um, contribution to the world by having conversations about politics and listening to politics and things like that. Even though they're not really affecting anything, and voting doesn't really do anything because I mean it's literally one vote in whatever. Um, I don't think anybody does anyone really like politics in fiction, or is it just um, something that we've decided is mature and necessary for the plot, I guess. Even though it really isn't. I feel like you could take the Time of Contempt book and remove a bunch of the politics talk. You could take characters like Dijkstra just out of the book. Just get rid of him, like basically, just get rid of him, and just focus on the adventures of Geralt and stuff like that, because that's a lot more fun and interesting. But basically, too, in this book, it was basically just Geralt and his troop traveling, like, through this war-torn land for 200 pages, 300 pages or something, split up by bits where people were talking about politics. Um, it got to the point where I actually did start skipping pages because when the sorceresses had met up the second time and they started talking about politics, I was simply not interested. I was not interested in the politics, in the sexuality, um, in the feminism. I was not interested in it, and so I just started skipping pages until it got to the good stuff again. Because and I'm glad I did that because I don't think I really missed anything. a lot of it is just characters just idle chatter, and they're not even really changing anything. There's no real events happening. They're just talking about what's going on. And yeah, they're giving you some information if you're a massive nerd, I guess, about what's going on in the fictional world. It's not real. But, you know, I think that stuff is boring, and so I skipped the chapters. Or at least like two of them. One or two. Um, After I realized, I had free will and I could do that. But yeah, it's kind of a stupid practice to split up a book like that. I don't think that anybody should do that under any circumstances whatsoever, actually. Um, Maybe there's a way to do it, I guess, that's good and actually enjoyable to read, but I really don't think so. I think that we don't need as many chapters where we see what the villains are talking about and doing and what they're planning. Um, there's so many instances in movies and books where we cut to the villain and it's just the villain talking, and they're not even really doing anything. They're just talking about what's going on. Like you'll see the hero do something, and then it cuts away to a scene where some minion is like, my like master, I have news to tell you, and then they just tell you what happened in the last scene, and that's basically what happens in in this last Witcher book I read, and what happens in a lot of like Game of Thrones and stuff like that. You'll just read about an event, and then you'll read characters' reactions to the event, which sometimes can be interesting, but it depends on the character. If it's a character that cares. So, for example, if uh, spoilers for Game of Thrones, by the way. So, in the Red Wedding, when the Starks, it was the mommy Stark and grown-up Stark boy that got slaughtered. Um, and then Arya Stark, I think, eventually heard of it, and Sansa Stark heard of it. You're interested in those characters' reactions to that information, but you're really not interested in most other people's reactions to that information, because basically the other characters are just like, dang, the Starks were killed, that's crazy, and like they violated the peace tradition of stuff, of like the bread and salt or whatever. That's insane. And then like there's 3 different scenes where 6 different characters discuss that thing that happened. We don't need all of that because we literally saw the scene from the perspectives of the characters that it happened. We need very few extra perspectives on the situation. Um, yeah, that's my opinion about that. I don't think that it's a very good storytelling technique to randomly and seemingly arbitrarily, I honestly think so, mostly arbitrarily, just kind of split up your chapters by what character is like trying to entertain the reader by mixing things up a little bit. If that is your goal, I really think that's a bad idea. Now, if you're doing something, if that's not your goal, and you're just trying to keep things in chronological order, and you're trying to have different threads happening at the same time, I mean, I guess, I guess, but I also think that it should be avoided because I mean, it still has the same effect of splitting up the chapters, and as a reader, you get invested into one character. But by the way, the whole reason I'm ranting about this, I actually was not going to talk this long about this. I was going to talk for like 30 seconds about this, then do a different topic, but I'll have to save that for later. But I was reading the 4th Witcher book, which is The Tower of the Swallow. Um, Wait, did I already get through the 3rd book? Am I insane? Hold on. I didn't accidentally like skip a book or something. I'm pretty sure I did not. Oh wait. Maybe I'm thinking of maybe I'm mentioning the wrong book here. Uh okay, I literally don't remember like I think I might when I'm criticizing the Time of Contempt book, I might be meaning to criticize the Baptism of Fire book. Hold on. Um I can't figure it out. I don't was Geralt on this journey for 2 books? That's even worse. Huh? Wait. Okay, hold on. Where do I find... I'm trying to look for Geralt. See, here's the problem. I can't even find where Geralt is. The book is called The Witcher. Um, okay, I can't figure out the discussion. Yeah, so basically, I don't know. I, what did this journey start in Time of Contempt when he's heading towards Nilfgaard or whatever? No. I can't figure it out. I might be meaning to criticize the Baptism of Fire book. Like, but see, there's another issue. I opened the book, I couldn't even figure out like where the character Geralt was flipping through pages because there's so many different story threads going on in those 2 books. I, I couldn't even figure out where in the timeline Geralt was just opening the book. Um, and that I just think that's kind of lame because really it, does anyone really want to read about Dijkstra and Yennefer's conversations and whoever else's conversations um, when we could be reading about Geralt and the adventures he's going on? I was kind of surprised reading these books that so far Geralt doesn't even... I mean, Geralt's really not the main character, I feel like the title of The Witcher is actually referring to Ciri, and it's just kind of purposefully misleading. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but Geralt hardly even seems like a character. He's mostly a MacGuffin, I guess. Like, people follow him around, but we really don't see a lot of his emotions from his perspectives or anything. We don't see a lot of his thoughts from his perspective. And he doesn't even really contribute much to the flavor of these stories. It's mostly these other characters. Geralt's just kind of like a guy who, hunts monsters, and he's kind of quiet, and he's got a sword. But most of the actual story comes from like Ciri and Ciri and Dandelion and Yennefer, I guess. Um, Geralt is like less of an influential character than Dijkstra. He has less character, less personality than Dijkstra, I guess. Anyway, I feel like you should have fun prioritized in these books, in any book. I don't think that because it's just a shame. Because I started talking about this in this 4th book, the Tower of Swallows. For the first several chapters here, oh, it's just 2 chapters, but it's 75 pages. The story is focusing on Ciri, and it got really interesting and really good. And I wanted to continue into the next chapter, chapter 3, reading more about Ciri's journey. But now it's switching to Dandelion, and I don't even want to read the book anymore right now. All of the joy was just sucked out of me because I'll have to read through a Dandelion chapter when I really want to read a Ciri chapter. So not only is um, my passion just being turned off, um, but now I'm going to have to, in my mind, store away all the information I just read and save it for later. And now I'm going to have to absorb new information, and then I'm going to have to hold that for later when we go back to a Ciri chapter. I would prefer to just read like 200 pages of Ciri and then 200 pages of Geralt. I feel like that makes a lot more sense, especially if the characters aren't meeting up. And what you could do, honestly, is since Ciri isn't really hearing any news of the White Wolf herself, I mean Geralt, she's not hearing any news of him. You know, maybe she could have a few dreams about him, as she does in the book. So for example, this is great. This is actually genius. So in these books, it goes back and forth, but the characters, like Geralt and Ciri, they've been having dreams about each other, and so they kind of know what the other person is up to just a little bit. They've got hints and visions of what the other person is going through. So you could theoretically, but the problem is whenever like a dream like that happens, except for maybe one time. Actually, one time with Ciri, she had a dream about Yennefer, and we didn't realize it was about Yennefer. But basically, what usually happens is we'll watch the events happen in the chapter, and then in the next chapter, the character will have a dream about what just happened, what we just saw, and we, the audience, will be like, "Ooh, I know what just happened." And it's like, yeah, obviously we knew what just happened that person dreamed about because we just saw it right before the dream happened. But what you could have done is you could have had, for example, Ciri have all of her 200 pages before Geralt even shows up, before we read about Geralt at all. And she could be having dreams about the things that Geralt is up to, which could intrigue us for later. You could have something like a vision of a monster that Geralt's about to fight in Ciri's dream, and us, the reader, will be like, what the heck was that? And we'll be interested later when we finally do get to the Geralt chapters, because we've had all these weird dreams about Geralt, and now we want some answers about, what's going on. As opposed to reading the chapter where Geralt does the thing, and then Ciri dreams about it. You know what I mean? Doesn't what I just said sound way cooler than how the books are actually laid out? Yeah. So, I don't really think I have too much to say, but I'm just complaining. I think that uh I mean I'm still reading this series, of course, but every now and then I want to put it down. Uh, I don't know. I kind of want to get to these later books. I'm on book 4, and there's 5 that are numbered, and then the other ones, I think that they might actually chronologically take place before these numbered 5 books. But in this book series I ordered, they are laid out after the 5 numbered ones. So I'm hoping that they are actually in chronological order, but I'm pretty sure that they're actually not. So I guess what might happen is I'm going to read this and it's going to come to a conclusion, and then I'll go back in time with the next books. And if that is the case, I might just finish up these 5 numbered ones and then leave the other ones for later, because I don't really fancy the idea of going back in time after the ending of whatever is about to happen. And I guess that's it.